Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to the Bleak Tent Marquee. This is behind the main Jalsa, and we're going to show you three exhibitions and another one as well, which we have here, which are special exhibitions which you won't be able to see anywhere else. So come on in. So the first one is the Al-Quran exhibition. This is similar to what we had last year, but this time we've improved it by adding in some original Qurans, some by which I mean ancient Qurans from 600 years ago plus, and we brought those in, and those are from Rizwan Beykhsab, who has very kindly given them to us to, or lent them to us to exhibit here. Now this exhibition, we won't be able to go through all of it, but it's basically answering the question, how do we know that the Quran that we have today is the same Quran that we had that was revealed that was revealed in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him? So it goes through the science of it, how it was originally put together, and what was the history of it all. And we cover a lot of ground in this, so I'd really recommend that you come and read this. There are quite a few panels, so I won't be able to go through all of it, but I do want to show you one or two highlights, which are these new Qurans. I say new Qurans, they're new to us, but they're extremely old. So this is an Ottoman Quran. Sorry, this is a Quran from Iran, rather. This is from 1650. And we have other Qurans here. This is about 200 years old, from Afghanistan. And I'll show you another one over here. So this is the Ottoman Quran. This is from, again, about 1650, 1660. And it's a very lavish Quran, if you will. The gold lining that you can see is 32 karat gold, and the red that you can see came from crushed rubies. So they put a lot of money and effort into these things, of course, many hundred years ago. And we also have some ink pots and some pens that they used to use, or the gulams that they're called, where they used to dip into it, and then they used to write their Qurans from there. We have another ink pot here. And over here we have something that's very, very interesting. These are early editions of the George Sale Quran. Now the George Sale Quran was the earliest translation into English, and this was sent by George Sale, but actually it was by one of his slaves, who I believe actually won his freedom from that. So these are very early editions of those, and interestingly we have the translation of Khatam al-Nabiyyin, a seal of the prophets, in the first ever English translation, which of course is the correct translation, though it's become a contentious point in the recent past. And we have here a scroll. This is called the Traveller's Quran. This is the entire Quran on a single scroll. We have something similar today, but we scroll through it rather than have it on a scroll. So we'll come through here now. This covers how the Quran was standardized in the time of the Khulafa, especially the third Khalifa, Hazrat Osman, how he standardized it, and what was the history in the time of Hazrat Abu Bakr and Hazrat Umar. And we go through some of this about how it was compiled and fully written and fully checked against all the people that had memorized the Quran. Because although people don't know this, the Quran actually had this dual preservation right from the beginning, where people would write it down and they would memorize it. And they had so many people who had memorized the Quran, especially in the time of the Sahaba, and they were able to check with the written records, and at every Ramadan they'd obviously go through the entire Quran again. So we have every level of preservation that we could ask for. Now we come on to Signs of the Hour. Signs of the Hour is a brand new exhibition. We really recommend coming and checking this out. This is asking the question that how do we know this is the time of the promised Messiah? And what are the prophecies of this time? So as we go through, we can have a look at some of them. We go through what is the meaning of the hour, as-sa'a. That is the spiritual revolution at the time of any prophet. And we talk about how we know it's at this time in particular. And that's primarily through all the different signs. But also, in fact, we actually have the timings, because the Quran talks about how there will be 1,000 years of spiritual darkness that come over the world. And that will happen after, and you can gather from the Hadith, 300 years of spiritual prosperity after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So there are so many different ways that we can understand that the time of the promised Messiah was the 14th century after the advent of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Now as we go through, I won't be able to go through everything, but I will be able to give you a few highlights. How the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, told us that in this time we will see the spiritual degeneration of the Muslims. We will also see the appearance of the Antichrist, and as according to the Prophet Messiah, peace be upon him, the Antichrist were those unspiritual and anti-spiritual doctrines that were being spread by Christian missionaries, for instance, and also European philosophers that would ultimately lead people away from believing in the oneness of God. And the promised Messiah, peace be upon him, has come to restore belief in the oneness of God. Now, as we come here, I think these are probably my favourite panels, to be honest, because there are some fantastic prophecies here where the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the Holy Quran talk about there will be new forms of travel. So, the Quran talks about this, that in this time, the she-camels, 10 months pregnant, would be abandoned. And in here, in the Hadith, we also have that at the time of the son of Mary, the she-camel will be abandoned and no one would seek wealth tax from it, meaning that it would no longer be an asset, whereas in the past it was. Now, why is that? Because there'll be new forms of transport, and the Hadith clearly lists this. It talks about how these new forms of transport will go like a cloud driven by the wind, how their length will be 60 yards, how they'll go far into the sea, and how they will even be able to, it says that the earth is folded up for it, and how the travel will precede the sun to its setting place. So talking about how these new forms of travel will be able to cross the earth in less than a day. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, also told us about how the new social conditions of this time. So, one of my favourite ones, he says that in this time you will see barefoot, naked, destitute shepherds competing and constructing tall buildings. Now, just 2 generations ago, 1 or 2 generations ago in for instance, the UAE, in Dubai, you had people who that were literally shepherds suddenly had a huge amount of wealth, and now this is literally what they do. They compete in constructing tall buildings. So this itself is a proof of the existence of God. And then we come on to some of the new technologies. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that musical instruments and singing girls will be on their heads. Very difficult to understand until you see the invention of headphones. He said that a man's thigh will tell him what has occurred at his home after he has left. And I have on my thigh here my phone. And he said that dishes will communicate with each other. It didn't make any sense back then. The Sahaba, may Allah be pleased with them, just wrote this down, they memorized it. Dishes will communicate with each other, and now we understand that satellite dishes communicate with each other. So we're going to go over a few other signs quickly. We talked about how in this time you'd have the creation of the state of Israel, and also how there will be a smoke following a blaze, and the smoke itself and the shadow it causes will itself create immense pain. And this refers to, of course, nuclear warfare and the radiation that comes from it. We come over here now. We have these on the Advent, on the Messiah, on the promised Messiah, peace be upon him. And we go through how the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, literally saw the promised Messiah in a state of vision. And he described him. And he said that I saw in my dream a man of brown colour, the best one can see amongst brown colour. And his hair was long that it fell between his shoulders. And he was told that this is the son of Mary. And this was different from the description of Jesus, peace be upon him, the Messiah of the Jews. Because in that, on the same page basically, of Sahih Bukhari, it said that Jesus was of red complexion, curly hair, and a broad chest. So the physical description is different. And we go through the different functions that the promised Messiah would have. So how he would break the cross, break the doctrines of the cross, and how he would spiritually purify people. And that's on these slides as well. We come to the last part of this exhibition, Signs of the Hour, where we see the eclipse of the sun and the moon. And the Quran itself says that the time of the great spiritual resurrection of the Muslims and of the entire world would happen when you have the eye dazzled, meaning new technologies. There'll be so many new things in the world. The moon is eclipsed and the sun and moon are brought together. So this is talking about the lunar and the solar eclipses. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, also elaborated on this. He said that the lunar and the solar eclipses would happen in the time of the Imam Mahdi, and it would be a special sign for him, that they would happen on certain days of Ramadan, and he gave us those days. And in 1894 in the Eastern Hemisphere, and in 1895 in the Western Hemisphere, that exact thing happened, where the lunar and the solar eclipses happened on the specific days at the time of the promised Messiah. And the penultimate sign is the sign of the plague. This is the insect of the earth that is referred to in the Quran and in the Hadith, about how there will be an insect which will wound those who don't believe. And the Prophet explained how this is fulfilled in the plague which ravaged India at the time, about a decade after the Prophet Messiah made his claim. And the Prophet Messiah's followers and his close family, his companions were protected from this. And this was a great sign as well. And finally, we talk about how the sun will rise from the west. The hour will not be established until the sun will rise from the west. So this can't happen literally, because in the Quran it talks about how the patterns of the sun and moon rising are fixed. But it means the son of Islam, the son of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, will rise from the West. And in fact, we see that in this age, and peculiar to this age, is the advent of Islam, or the propagation of Islam to the Western peoples of the world, to the Europeans for the first time ever, to the Americas. And the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat have been the pioneers of this. Pioneer missionaries to both America and UK, as well as around the Western world, have been the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat. And now they have the honor of housing Khilafat itself. And this is how the Son of Islam is rising from the West. So I'm going to speed you through one more exhibition, and that is Letters to Kings and Queens. A message of peace and a word of warning. So in this we talk about the different letters that have been sent by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the promised Messiah, and then the Khulafa after him, to the various kings and queens and dignitaries of their times. So we talk about how the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, sent a letter to Heraclius, and how Heraclius received it. How he sent it to Marquee, the governor of Egypt, to the Negus of Abyssinia, and to many, many others. And in fact, in many ways, the way that they received them determined their fate. Those who received them very harshly and tore them up, they themselves lost their kingdom. But those who treated it with respect had their kingdom and in fact enjoyed great prosperity afterwards. We talk about how we know that they're reliable, and also the covenants of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And these were primarily covenants with Christian people, and he gave them guarantees of safety and security. And he said, you know, in the same way that our Khulafa talk about, you know, that the fact that we are here to establish peace, we have all learned this from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his example. And these are the true teachings of Islam. So we go through some of the things that the covenant said, as well as, of course, the Constitution of Medina, which is I think the first real constitution of a city-state, an incredibly progressive thing that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did. And I'll read you one or two quotes, where he said that there will be equality between Muslims and Jews. He said, those Jews who follow the believers will be helped and will be treated with equality. No Jew will be wronged for being a Jew. The enemy of the Jews who follow us will not be helped. So he said that they were citizens and co-citizens in the same city-state. And in fact, the Prophet, peace be upon him, included all those people within the Ummah, even if they weren't Muslim. And of course, he also said another quote, which I'll get from here, which is that if anyone attacks anyone who is a party to this pact, the other must come to his help. They, the parties to this pact, must seek mutual advice and consultation. So again, he's putting the Muslims, the pagans, and the Jews all together on equal citizenry, equal footing within the state. So we go through these. I won't be able to go through all of this. These are some of the pictures of the covenants. And we also go now to the letters of the Promised Messiah, peace be upon him, who of course continue that prophetic tradition of inviting the kings and queens and dignitaries to Islam. And he wrote letters to the Promised Messiah, he wrote letters to Queen Victoria, and he in fact wrote a book for her explaining the beauties of Islam. And she could actually read Urdu, as we've all learned through recent films. So she may well have read it. We don't really know. The historical record there has been lost, but we can hope inshallah that she did. And if we come through a little bit more, we can see how in that book he talked about called the gifts for the Queen. He said, "O honoured Queen of India, we humbly submit before you that, on the occasion of the joy of the 60th Jubilee, make an effort to exonerate Jesus. I dare to submit to you with the purest of intentions, filled with the fear of God and truth, to clear Jesus the Messiah with courageous resolve of the stigma placed upon this honour." And he said, "Of the wonders which God has bestowed upon me, one is that I have met Jesus the Messiah several times in a state of perfect wakefulness, which is called a vision." And he said that he has talked to him and he has ascertained from him the nature of his real claim and teachings. And he said, a major point which is worthy of attention is that Jesus the Messiah is so disgusted with the doctrines of atonement, Trinity and sonship, as if these are the great impostures that have been fashioned against him. I believe firmly that if a sincere seeker after truth would come and stay with me for a period and would wish to meet the Messiah in a state of vision, he would be able to do so. So you see the courage of the Prophet Messiah and the courage of all prophets that they have, that they do not have any kind of fear of talking to people who are esteemed in a worldly sense. But the Prophet Messiah here is saying, I know you are the leader of the greatest Christian nation on earth, but Jesus, peace be upon him, I have met him in a state of vision, and the doctrines which you follow are incorrect, and I am here to correct them. And now we come to the letters of the fifth caliph of our present caliph, may Allah strengthen his hand, where he has written letters and also done talks to people around, to dignitaries and world leaders, in fact, around the world. And he's written all those letters to them, and he's called them to establish justice, because without justice you won't have peace. And these have, of course, been collected in the book World Crisis and a Pathway to Peace. And we have got these 9 points pathway to peace, which I'll read out to you to finish. Establish absolute justice, recognize the Creator, foster global unity, seek nuclear disarmament, eliminate weapon profiteering, create economic equity and eradicate poverty, work for the good of one's nation, reject extremism, and instill service to humanity. And if the caliph's advice was heeded, we'd see great peace and prosperity in the world. May Allah enable this to happen very, very soon. Thank you very much for listening to the explanation of the exhibition, but please do come down. We are behind the Jalsa. You go to the head of the Jalsa, you come down, you turn right a bit, come to the debate tent, you'll be able to read all this in much greater detail, and it'll probably be much more enjoyable for you. Jazakallah.